Many years ago, there lived a family of 6 children in a peaceful village in the southern part of Nigeria. 5 of these children were boys, and the youngest was their precious sister, Elle. The children were raised by their hardworking parents, both of whom were farmers. They lived in unity, tending the fields together, eating together, and laughing together. The whole village admired the closeness of this family. It was said that their love was so strong that it made the crops grow richer in the fields. Elle, being the only girl and the last born, was cherished by her brothers. They would often bring her small gifts, beautiful beads, colorful flowers, or fresh fruits from the farm. Each day was full of laughter and warmth. For the boys, their little sister was a joy, and they made it their duty to protect her. Life seemed perfect, and their days passed like the gentle flow of a river. Little did they know that this peace was about to be shaken by a dark shadow. One bright morning, the father called 2 of his sons, Onye, the eldest, and Elle, the younger, and gave them a simple task. Go to the yam field, he said, and harvest the yams. Bring back enough for us to sell and also feast on. The boys, as usual, agreed and set off together. The path to the farm was familiar, and they walked in companionable silence, their baskets empty but their hearts full of the excitement of harvest. Upon reaching the farm, they worked diligently under the hot sun, uprooting yams from the fertile soil. After hours of hard work, it was time to rest and enjoy the fruits of their labor before harvesting more. But as they sat down to prepare their meal, a disagreement sparked between them. Onye wanted boiled yam, while Elle, younger and more playful, insisted on roasting the yam. This simple difference in preference soon moved into something far more dangerous. At first, it was a mere disagreement, 2 brothers with different tastes. Onye, being the elder, expected Elle to listen to him. I am the eldest, Elle, so you should respect my decision. Boiled yam is better, and that is what we will have, Onye declared, confident that his younger brother would agree. But Elle, who had always admired his elder brother, felt a sudden urge to assert himself. I am tired of always agreeing with you, Onye. Today, we will roast the yam. It tastes better when roasted over the fire, Elle argued. Neither of them was willing to yield. Their voices grew louder, echoing through the fields. What began as a harmless debate turned into a full-blown argument, and soon, frustration filled the air like a storm gathering over the horizon. As the argument escalated, Onye's patience wore thin. His face flushed with anger as he stood up, towering over Elle. You will do as I say, Elle. Stop being stubborn, he shouted. But Elle refused to back down. No, I won't. You always make the decisions, and I'm tired of it, he yelled back, his young face filled with anger and disappointment. In a moment of rage, Onye reached for the knife they had brought to peel the yams. His hand trembled as he held it, his mind clouded by fury. Before he realized what he was doing, he pounced at his younger brother, slashing at him. The sharp blade pierced Elle's arm, and blood began to flow. Onye froze, his heart pounding in his chest. What had he done? As soon as the blade struck, Onye was filled with horror. His heavy rage became suddenly calm like an ice water, replaced by a deep and suffocating guilt. Elle cried out in pain, holding on his bleeding arm. The wound was very deep, but the sight of his wicked brother hurted him deeper. Onye, filled with regret, came closer to his brother. Elle, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, Onye stammered, dropping the knife as though it had burned him. Elle, shocked and in pain, moving back from his brother, fell on the ground in pains, his eyes wide with disbelief. The bond that had always tied them together seemed to snap in that moment. Onye knew he had to act fast. Without wasting any more time, he ran as fast as he could back to the village, his heart heavy with fear and regret. He had to tell their father what happened, even if it meant facing the consequences. Odian burst into the family compound, breathless and panicked. His parents, sensing that something was wrong, rushed to his side. "Father! Mother," he gasped. I've hurt Icom." His words spilled out in a rush as he explained the argument, the fight, and the knife that had cut his brother. His father, a man of few words, listened in silence, his face grim. Their mother, her eyes wide with worry, immediately began gathering herbs for the wound. "Take us to him," his father said in a voice that was both calm and commanding. They hurried back to the farm, praying that Icom's injury was not as serious as it seemed. When they arrived at the farm, Icom was still lying on the ground, holding his arm tightly. His face was pale from pain and shock, but he was alive. Their mother knelt beside him, examining the wound. "It's not that deep," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "But we must treat it quickly." She began applying herbs to the wound, her hand steady despite the turmoil inside her heart. Odian stood off to the side, guilt staring at him like a wild animal. His father, seeing the pain in both his sons, said nothing at first. He simply watched, his mind weighing the situation. It wasn't just the physical wound that needed healing. The unity of the family, once so strong, had been shattered by this act of violence. The days ahead would test them all. As the family returned home, the weight of what had happened settled on everyone's shoulders. In their village, it was considered an abomination to harm another person with a weapon, especially within the family. Such acts were not taken lightly. Word of the incident spread quickly, and soon, the elders of the village summoned Odian to the palace to answer for his actions. Odian's father knew this was inevitable. The village had its laws, and no one was above them. "You must face the consequences, my son," his father told him as they prepared to go before the village chief. Odian nodded, the shame heavy in his heart. He would accept whatever punishment was handed to him. He had betrayed his brother, his family, and the unity that had once defined them. At the palace, the chief sat in judgment, surrounded by the village elders. Odian stood before them, his head bowed in shame. The chief listened to the story, with his serious face. "It is a grave offense to spill blood, especially between brothers," the chief said. "But the fact that you have come forward, and that your brother's wound is not life-threatening, speaks in your favor." Odian's father stepped forward, offering to pay the fine required by village law for such an offense. The chief accepted the offering, but the tension in the air was thick. Odian knew that no fine could heal the wound he had inflicted on his family's bond. The chief dismissed them, but his final words echoed in Odian's mind, "May this be a lesson to you. Let no anger blind your heart again." Though the fine was paid and the village had moved on from the incident, the damage within the family remained. Icom recovered physically, but he was distant and cold towards Odian. The once warm bond between the brothers was now brittle and fragile. They no longer laughed together or shared stories by the fire. The family's unity, once admired by all, was slowly fading. Odian tried to apologize, but Icom would not hear of it. "You hurt me, Odian. I trusted you, and you hurt me," Icom said one evening when Odian tried to speak to him. The pain in his voice was clear, and it cut deeper than any knife. The rest of the family felt the strain, and even little Oko, who had always been the glue between her brothers, could not bring them back together. Weeks passed, and the seasons began to change. The village moved on with its daily life, but inside the family, things were different. The home that was once filled with laughter is now filled with only silence. The brothers continued to work in the farms, but the joy they once shared in their labor was gone. Their parents watched in sorrow, not knowing how to heal the distance between their sons. After 2 months, Icom's wound healed, but the scar remained, a constant reminder of the day their family's unity was broken. Odian continued to try to make amends, but Ikom's heart had hardened. The family was at a crossroads, and it was unclear whether they would ever return to the happiness they once knew. Aku, the youngest and the heart of the family, felt the growing distance between her brothers the most. She no longer received the cheerful greetings of her brothers or their playful gifts. The once harmonious atmosphere in their home was now filled with tension. Aku, although young, was wise beyond her years, and she knew that something had to be done. One evening, as the sun set over the village and bathed the fields in golden light, Aku sat beside her mother and said, "Mother, can't we make things right again? I miss the way things used to be. Odian and Ikom haven't spoken to each other in weeks." Her mother sighed deeply, her heart aching for her children. "Sometimes, my dear, wounds take time to heal, even if they aren't on the skin," she said softly. But Aku wasn't satisfied with that answer. She decided to take matters into her own hands. She would speak to each of her brothers in turn and try to mend what had been broken. Little did she know that the path to reconciliation would be more difficult than she imagined. The next day, Aku approached Ikom while he was sitting alone in the farm, tending to the yams. He walked in silence, his hands busy but his mind distant. "Ikom," Aku began softly, "I miss the way you used to laugh with Odian. Can't you forgive him?" Ikom stopped his work and looked at his sister, his expression hard. "Aku, you're too young to understand. He hurt me. How can I trust him again when he almost killed me?" Aku's eyes filled with tears. She had never seen Ikom so bitter. "But he's your brother, Ikom. He made a mistake, but he's sorry. We're a family, and families should forgive." Ikom shook his head. "It's not that simple, Aku. Maybe one day, but not now." Disheartened, Aku left Ikom and went to find Odian. He was sitting by the river, lost in thought. "Odian," she called gently, "why don't you talk to Ikom anymore? I know you're sorry for what happened." Odian looked up, his face lined with guilt and sadness. "I've tried, Aku. But Ikom won't listen. I've hurt him too deeply. I don't know if things will ever be the same." Aku sat beside him, her small hand resting on his arm. "They will, Odian. You just have to keep trying. We need you both to be happy again." Odian smiled weakly at his sister's optimism, but in his heart, he wasn't sure if her words were true. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between Odian and Ikom continued. Although they worked side by side in the farms, they did so without speaking. Their parents, worried and weary, watched as the once close brothers drifted further apart. The village, too, noticed the change in the family. Whispers began to spread about how the once perfect family was no longer so perfect. The chief of the village, hearing of the continued discord, called for a meeting with the family. "You are pillars of our community," the chief said to the father. "Your family's unity was a symbol of strength for everyone here. But now, that unity is crumbling. This cannot go on." Odian's father nodded solemnly. He had hoped that time would heal the wounds, but it seemed that more was needed. The chief, wise in his old age, suggested a celebration of reconciliation, a ceremony that would bring the brothers together and allow them to let the past hurts go. The family agreed, though neither Odian nor Ikom seemed hopeful that a simple ceremony could undo the damage that had been done. The day of the ceremony arrived. The village gathered in the center, where a large fire had been lit. The chief stood at the front, surrounded by the elders. Odian and Ikom stood before him, the tension between them almost visible. The chief spoke of the importance of family and the strength that comes from forgiveness. "To hold on to anger is to carry a burden too heavy for any man," the chief said. "But to forgive is to free oneself and others." As part of the ceremony, Odian and Ikom were asked to share a meal together, a symbolic act of unity and peace. The food prepared was the very thing that had caused their argument, yam. There was boiled yam and roasted yam, prepared equally, so that neither brother would feel their preference was ignored. Odian took a deep breath as he looked at Icom. I am truly sorry, Icom. I never meant to hurt you. I let my pride blind me. His voice cracked with emotion. Icom remained silent for a moment, the weight of his brother's words sinking in. I know you're sorry, Odian, he finally said. But it's not easy to forget what happened. The village watched as the brothers sat in quiet, waiting to see if they could find it in their hearts to move forward. After what seemed like an eternity, Icom slowly reached for the bowl of roasted yam. He took a piece and offered it to Odian, a small gesture but one filled with meaning. Odian, surprised and relieved, took the roasted yam and ate it. He then offered Icom a piece of the boiled yam, and Icom accepted. The act, though simple, signified the first step towards healing. The village erupted in cheers, happy to see the brothers share a meal once more. But the journey was far from over. Though they had taken the first step towards reconciliation, the deeper wounds between them would take time to mend. Though the ceremony had helped to break the ice between Odian and Icom, their relationship was still fragile. They were polite to each other, but the warmth that had once existed between them was still absent. Aku, ever hopeful, continued to play the role of peacemaker, encouraging her brothers to spend more time together. One afternoon, Aku suggested that they take a walk together to the river, just as they used to do before the incident. Odian and Icom agreed, though the walk was filled with awkward silence at first. As they reached the riverbank, memories of their childhood began to surface. They had spent countless hours here, fishing, playing, and dreaming of the future. Icom, feeling the weight, broke the silence. Do you remember when we used to race along this riverbank? He asked, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Odian nodded. I do. You always won, he said with a chuckle. For the first time in a long while, they both laughed. It was a small moment, but it felt like the beginning of something new, a bond that, though scarred, could still grow stronger. Though Odian and Icom had begun to share moments of laughter, Odian still carried a heavy burden of guilt. He often found himself lying awake at night, replaying the moment he had raised the knife against his brother. Each time the memory resurfaced, he felt the weight of his actions pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. He knew that Icom had begun to forgive him, but Odian wasn't sure if he could forgive himself. One night, as the village lay in silence, Odian went to his father's hut. The old man was sitting by the fire, lost in thought. Father, Odian said softly, sitting beside him, how do you forgive yourself after doing something terrible? His father, wise and weathered by life, looked at his son for a long moment. Forgiving yourself is often harder than seeking forgiveness from others, he said. But remember, Odian, we are all human, and humans make mistakes. What matters is how we learn from them and how we move forward. You are not defined by that one moment. You are defined by the love you have for your brother and your family. Odian nodded, but his heart still ached. He knew that the road to self-forgiveness would be long and difficult, but his father's words gave him a glimmer of hope. While Odian battled his guilt, Icom faced his own internal struggles. Though he had begun to forgive his brother, a part of him still felt the sting of betrayal. He found himself questioning whether he could ever fully trust Odian again. The scar on his arm was a constant reminder of the day their bond had been broken. One day, while walking in the fields, Icom felt the weight of these thoughts growing heavier. He stopped and looked out over the yams they had planted together. The field had always been a symbol of their unity, but now, it felt like a reminder of their fractured relationship. As he stood there, lost in thought, Oku approached him. She had been watching her brothers closely, sensing the struggle within both of them. Icom, she said gently, you've always been strong, but even the strongest people need time to heal. It's okay to feel hurt, but don't let that hurt keep you from moving forward. Icom sighed, feeling the truth in his sister's words. I know, Oku. It's just hard. I want things to go back to the way they were, but I don't know if that's possible. Oku smiled softly. Maybe things won't ever be exactly the same, but that doesn't mean they can't be good again. You and Odian just have to find a new way to be brothers. Soon the seasons changed, and the time for the annual harvest festival approached. It was a time of celebration in the village, where everyone gathered to give thanks for the abundance of the land and to enjoy the fruits of their labor. The festival had always been a special time for the family, and this year, their father was given the honor of leading the ceremony. As part of the festival, there was a traditional competition among the young men of the village, testing their strength, endurance, and teamwork. In the past, Odian and Icom had always competed together, a formidable team that no one could beat. But this year, there was uncertainty. Would they compete as brothers once more, or would the beef between them keep them apart? The night before the festival, their father gathered the family around the fire. Tomorrow is a day of celebration, he said. But it is also a day to show the strength of our family's bond. Odian, Icom, I want you both to compete together, as you always have. Not just for yourselves, but for the unity of our family. The brothers exchanged a glance. They hadn't discussed the competition, but their father's words weighed heavily on their hearts. They both knew that this was more than just a test of physical strength. It was a test of their brotherhood. On the day of the harvest festival, the village was alive with music, laughter, and the smell of roasting yams. People dressed in their finest clothes, and the atmosphere was one of joy and celebration. Odian and Icom stood together at the edge of the field, watching as the other young men prepared for the competition. For a moment, there was an awkward silence between them. Then, Odian spoke. Icom, I know I've hurt you. But today, I want to prove to you, and to myself, that I can be the brother you deserve. Icom looked at him, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he nodded. Let's do this, Odian. Not just for the family, but for ourselves. As they stepped into the competition arena, the village erupted in cheers. The brothers worked together as they always had, their movements synchronized, their strength complementing each other's. For the first time in a long while, they felt like a team again. The competition was fierce, but Odian and Icom pushed through, relying on their trust in each other. By the end of the day, they stood victorious, not just over their competitors, but over the distance that had separated them. When the competition ended, the brothers stood side by side, their hearts lighter than they had been in months. The village cheered, and their father beamed with pride. Odian and Icom exchanged a look, and in that moment, they knew that something had changed between them. It wasn't that the past was forgotten, but they had taken the first real step towards healing. As the sun set and the festival continued, the family gathered together. Their mother, who had been quietly observing her son's journey, smiled softly. You two have always been strong, but today you showed the strength of your hearts, she said. I'm proud of both of you. Aku, her eyes shining with joy, hugged each of her brothers in turn. I knew you could do it, she said. You're stronger together than apart. For the first time in what felt like forever, the family shared a meal with laughter and warmth, just like they used to. Though there were still wounds to heal, the bond of blood had proven stronger than any disagreement or act of anger. One evening, Odian and Icom sat by the river, the same place where their deepest division had once become clear. Now, as the sun set, casting golden light over the water, the brothers spoke of their futures, their ambitions, and their hopes. It was a conversation they hadn't had in a long time, one filled with dreams and plans. I've been thinking, Odian began, his voice steady, about what I learned from all of this. I was proud. Too proud to listen, too proud to let go. It almost cost me everything. Icom nodded, his gaze on the horizon. I think we both learned something, Odian. You always looked out for me when we were younger, but I also learned that I can't always rely on you to make things right. I need to stand on my own, too. The brothers shared a quiet moment of understanding. They had grown in different ways, Odian, learning to temper his pride, and Icom, finding his independence. They knew that their bond was stronger now, not because they had forgotten the past, but because they had faced it together. Time, the healer of all wounds, continued its steady course, and the family thrived once again. The fields of yam that Odian and Icom walked on grew lush and abundant, a symbol of the renewal within the family. Their parents, once burdened by worry, now lived in peace, proud of the men their sons had become. Aku, too, grew into a young woman, still the heart of the family. Her gentle nature and wisdom brought harmony to her brothers, and her laughter filled the home with joy. She had been the silent glue, holding them all together when everything seemed to be falling apart. And now, she could finally bask in the happiness of seeing her family whole once more. They had learned that perfection wasn't the key to happiness. It was resilience, understanding, and the willingness to keep trying. Even when things seemed broken beyond repair, the family returned to their daily lives, stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. They knew that life would always bring challenges, but they had learned the most important lesson of all, that no matter what, they would face those challenges together. Thank you for watching. Remember to drop your thoughts, like and subscribe for more interesting and educating stories like this.